With pleasure now, I am joined by a special guest. Well, it's a bit of a treat because I'm joined by two special guests now. We have the Oliver twins, which are also known as the Philip Oliver and Andrew Oliver. Welcome to my show, to the pair of you. How are we today?
Good, thank you, Dan.
It's
Yeah,
great,
fine, thank you.
great to hear. Thank you so much for taking your time out from your schedule to talk to me today. I just wanted to ask some questions about your career. Really, you've had such a fascinating career, illustrious career, some might say.
And it's still
Well,
going.
thank you. Well,
Not
thank
too
you.
much in the past tense.
Yeah, I think we're into our fifth decade of making games. We're still loving it, still passionate about it. Things have changed a lot over the years, but generally, people love interactive entertainment. They love video games, which
That
is cool.
that's nice to hear. And where did your kind of passion for arcade and computer games begin?
I think
Gosh,
it was in the arcade. I think it literally was in the arcade. I mean, it was like as teenagers, sort of when your parents drag you down the shops or whatever. It's like, can we just lose ourselves in that arcade and we'll go and play Donkey Kong or Asteroids or
I think
yeah,
one of the first
sort of
ones we saw was Space Invaders. I remember seeing Space Invaders, and it must have been in sort of 79 or 80. First of all, at a swimming pool, there was sort of, and
sports
then
center.
in a quick save. If you remember the old supermarket quick
Yeah.
save, and I have to say that as 12 or 13-year-old boys, the idea of going into quick save was not normally a good idea, but the fact there was a Space Invaders machine in the corner was a very good idea.
Do you remember the quiz machines? Was there an arcade machine where you can actually do a pub quiz?
We never really played those much,
Hmm.
to be honest. I'll
No,
be
no,
honest. I'm not a
we went.
fan of. I'm not a fan of the quizzes
Hmm.
because you either know the answers, in which case it seems really obvious, or you don't know the answers and you go, "Oh, well, ask me something I do know then." So I really don't like. We have done so many genres of games over the years, and we've always avoided quiz games because I just don't think you can ever get the balance right.
It's like when you go in pubs now. There's usually a machine, but it's just it's a trivia or a fruit machine, like on a screen, fruit machine on a screen. And I don't know, I quite liked it when like there were like more video games, but then video games can't compete with the likes of the latest PlayStation or Xbox game, and they kind of know it, so they just avoid it. But I would have liked to have thought there was
Hmm.
some middle ground of games that work in a pub scenario. It's not a trivia game or a fruit machine.
So you just told me where you kind of got into the computer games and arcades. You were on a kids' TV show in the mid-80s.
Right.
Was that a great publicity to kickstart your career?
It, it was kind of yes, it was. It was October '83, and it was designer game competition that launched at the beginning of the summer holidays. And me and Andrew had already kind of learned how to write basic programming. We started with a ZX81 in '81, then we moved on to a Dragon 32 in '82, and by the time we got to to the early summer of '83, we'd got a BBC Micro, and we were pretty good at coding. And then this TV show, the Saturday show, said it's a designer game competition. Now we interpreted that as make a game. Turns out that they were quite surprised, and they told the judge told us that when he saw that we'd sent a cassette in, he was a bit surprised, loaded it up, and really liked it. But he said everybody else in the competition basically just sent pieces of A4 paper with scribbled kind of designs on them, and he said, "But you guys wrote a game." I have to say that the game, which we called at the time Strategy, but was released as Gambit later by Acorn Soft, wasn't actually a brilliant game, but it was a game start to finish, and it worked, and it was debugged and everything, and it was released as a full game.
You say publicity, but it wasn't. I mean, we were school kids. It wasn't about publicity. It was about self belief. Because at that point, yeah, all the kids at school knew that we were the geeks and we played around with computers. But like, were we any good at it? Did anyone think we were any good? But when you win a national competition, it'd be like winning Britain's Got Talent now. Suddenly, people go, "Oh, hang on a moment, maybe you can do this," like, and it just spurs you on. And so we, from that point, is like, we're going to make our careers at making games. When everyone was going, "This is never going to work," it's like, yeah, you love playing games, that's cool. Get a real job, like when you leave school.
It gave us a massive boost in confidence that everybody else suddenly appreciated. We'd actually learned this skill, which they were all dismissing, and actually it was quite a skill, so much so that we'd won this national competition. Our parents, they always saw us just go off the sort of, it was my bedroom, the computer was, we only had one computer, it was based in my bedroom, and they would basically see us kind of working all the weekends, evenings, probably up past midnight, and not really understand what we're doing and thinking, what a waste of time, what are they doing, kind of thing. And occasionally they'd come in and we'd be playing games because obviously that's what we love. But they didn't realize that actually we were learning a skill, and a skill that was actually really important, only they didn't see the importance of it. And of course, then when we won the competition, it's like, man, you've actually got a skill that we didn't realize. But we'd always believed that video games had a massive future, and this is what we wanted to do. So we understood it. It's just nobody else did.
So, Tommy, just a little bit about that TV show, and from there on, you mentioned the BBC Computer as well. Was that an inspiration? I know there was a game called Repton, which was created by a guy called Tim Tyler.
Yeah, that was a couple of years later after us.
Oh,
that was about 85. Yeah, I remember playing it.
I like Repton.
Yeah, excellent game. Really good game design, and very polished. But it was more like 85, I think you'll find, from Superior Software. But yeah, we played.
It was a bit of a copy of Mr. Do in the arcade, where you sort of run around digging out your own maze and falling rocks and stuff. But it wasn't that much of a copy. He'd taken a concept and then taken it further and made it much better. So good guy.
And
and all those games on the BBC, you talked about it being quite an inspirational machine. Okay, it was an expensive machine, and I know a lot of listeners out there who kind of remember the early 80s and stuff were like, oh, only the posh kids had a BBC Micro. And yeah, we were a middle class family. There's no doubt about that. But there were two of us. We were able to save our pocket money together. We were able to put all our Christmas present money together and our birthday money together. And so we had two funds to fund one machine. Whereas unfortunately, a lot of people couldn't kind of afford a BBC Micro. But yeah, God, it was a cool machine. It was easily the most powerful at the time home computer. It was so easy to program on. The BASIC was brilliant. It even had a feature where you could put assembly code into the BASIC, which helped you learn machine code, which is obviously the key to unlocking fast graphics and fast kind of video game games.
And there were two. So we spurred each other on. We were competitive when we were playing the games, like who could get the best score in Pac-Man and stuff. Then we'd get down to sort of code stuff, and it was like, well, I bet I can sort of code better than you can code, or like we'd like set down to do a program together. And it's like, you do this and I'll do that. But in programming circles, you have peer review programming, whereby you work together as a pair, because quite often you're too close to see your own bugs. You read past things. If you write text or whatever, you can read past your mistakes. Show it to someone else, and someone immediately goes, well, those are your mistakes. And so we had that advantage that we were not only coding twice as quickly, but it's collaboratively. It worked really well together.
And mentioning the BBC Computer, as a child of the 80s growing up, we had the Commodore 64. My neighbour had the BBC Computer, and I was always going over to his house after school, my next door neighbour, because I loved the printer. I was so jealous he had the printer and everything, and it just had the edge on the Commodore.
It did. The BBC Micro had the edge on the Commodore, but it did cost more than twice as much money, which is, as we say, a lot of people have sort of said, oh, it's kind of, you were the rich kids with the BBC Micro. And it's like, well, kind of, but it's also because there were two of us, so we pooled our funds. But yeah.
Going back to your career now, what was one of the first games that you bought out was Robin Hood?
Super Robin Hood, I'll have you know.
Oh, Super Robin Hood.
Not just any Robin Hood.
How did that come about?
Oh, we'll do the Street Fighter gag in a minute. If you can sort of turbo it, plus it, and extra it, like it's got to be better than the last one.
So, how did it come about? So, what actually happened was we were programming games and releasing quite a few games up to this point, and we were getting to the end of our sixth form, and our parents expected us to go to university. We were quite bright kids. We were studying A levels and were predicted to get good grades and stuff. But we didn't want to go to a university because they didn't teach how to make video games, and that's what we wanted to do. So we managed to we spoke to our head of sixth form, who basically advises on which computer which career. Yeah, he's sort of advising on careers and stuff, but also talk to you about what universities you want to go to and what courses you should do. And we're like, well, we just want to do video games, and nothing comes close to video games. I think it was electronics was about the closest you could get. They didn't even have programming back in those days, and if they did have programming modules on courses, it was Pascal and Fortran and punch cards and stuff. So it was like we weren't interested in any of that. Anyway, our head of sixth form talked to our parents during a parents' evening, talked them into, well, why don't you just give them a go for a year? Because a lot of people take a year out. Most people go traveling or something, but why don't you just let them have a year out to sort of, see if they can make a business out of this, or get it out of their systems, and then they go off to university. And so anyway, our dad sort of sat us down after this parents' evening and said, look, your mum and I, we're going to agree to you sort of doing this for a year, but then you'll go off to university. And we said, well, we still won't want to go. And he goes, look, I'll tell you what, if you make more money than me in the first year, then we won't say any more about it. So game on. So it's like, we had to make sure that we focused on the money. As I said, during the sixth form, we'd actually published, I don't know, probably 8 to 9 games, but none of them had really made much money. So after that conversation,
£250 generally.
Yeah, most of them were about £250 each. One of them was 10,000, Andrew. Let's not forget that one. But anyway, 2,000. Sorry, one of them was 2,000. Let's not forget that one. But so we'd done okay, but now we had a new goal that we had to sort of make a business out of this. We had 1 year to do it. We had to sort of earn more than our dad, because otherwise we might have to go to university, which we didn't want to do. So Robin Hood came about because we decided to go down to W.H. Smith's and look at what was selling. And we went down and we looked at the shelves, and the number one game at the time was Ghostbusters. A great movie, great music. We loved it. We were big fans. Not so much fans of the game. And it just occurred to us, standing looking at the shelves, that people buy what they recognize. People buy licenses. And we're like, oh, but we can't afford a license. And we go, we'll do what Disney does. We'll just use a license that's already out of date and already expired, but people don't realize it's already expired. So I could write a War of the Worlds game right now. Everybody thinks it's a license. It's not, because it's expired. So anyway, we came away saying, well, what licenses have expired? And we came up with the idea of Robin Hood. And obviously, Robin Hood sounds like a boring average title. So we said, well, let's call it Super Robin Hood. Interestingly enough, Miyamoto was doing exactly the same at the same time with Mario Brothers. How can I make Mario Brothers sound much better? I'll add the word super in front.
It does have a ring to it, doesn't it? Just adding that extra super into it.
The superlative. It works. Superlatives are good.
And so Robin Hood, that was a turning point in your career.
It certainly was.
So
can I just say, there was an obvious point. It's not that they invented this thing. I mean, there was obviously Batman and Superman. I mean, it was the time that Superman was big in the cinemas with Christopher Reeve. So it was like, look, he's not just a man, he's a Superman. So, I mean, it's not that, it's just, that's sort of where it came from as well. It's like, how do you make it more interesting? It's like, well, superheroes were doing it. Oh, hang on, superheroes. Right. Robin Hood, he's a superhero, he's a superwoman.